to keep you waiting. Complicated business. Complicated. Thank you very much. I've just received a call from Secretary Clinton. She congratulated us, it's about us, on our victory. And I congratulated her and her family on a very, very hard-fought campaign. I mean, she fought very hard. Hillary has worked very long and very hard over a long period of time, and we owe her a major debt of gratitude for her service to our country. I mean that very sincerely. Now it's time for America to bind the wounds of division. We have to get together. To all Republicans and Democrats and independents across this nation, I say it is time for us to come together as one united people.
And there you have it. Wednesday, November 9th, 2016, the culmination of the U.S. presidential election, which saw the historic election ascension to power of Donald J. Trump, President-elect of the United States of America, something that was utterly and completely unexpected, that really upset and shocked the entire world body politic. We have to admit that this is something that many of the political elite and news pundits had absolutely no conception could possibly happen. Or if they did, they wouldn't admit it, because their objective all along, from the very first moment Donald Trump descended his escalator from Trump Tower to the main area where he gave his speech announcing his intention to run for president of the United States, the media was against him. The very first thing they said was, well, he said something disparaging about a minority group. That would be comments about Mexicans. And they completely misinterpreted what he exactly said and used that to bash him incessantly for weeks and months thereafter. And they created a poisoned atmosphere where they expected that the coronation of Hillary Clinton could be expedited by their direct involvement in manipulating and scaring people into voting against Donald Trump. And it didn't work. The voters overwhelmingly decided that they were going to come out for Donald Trump. And that includes minority votes. The black vote came out far in excess of what was expected for Donald Trump. The Hispanic vote came out in excess of what was expected for Donald Trump, including blue-collar and labor workers came out for Donald Trump in large numbers. And of course, you have the predictable media spin on it, the mainstream media, where they're saying, well, it's white lash. If you have someone like Van Jones on CNN, who was really, due to a case of sour grapes and shock, saying Donald Trump really represents white America, which in Van Jones's mind and in most liberals' minds represents racism, hatred, xenophobia, homophobia, and every other kind of phobia. If that sounds familiar, that was one piece of a speech that Hillary Clinton gave a week before the election, where she said, we got the Trump's supporters, they're a basket of deplorables. They're homophobic, they're xenophobic, they're this-ophobic, they're that-ophobic. Essentially, she was reiterating what Barack Obama said back in 2008 when he said that a certain segment of America was clinging to its guns and its religion. In other words, he was making fun of white middle-class America. But guess what? The tables have been turned. It's a new dawn in America. It's a new morning again in America, just as it was in 1980 with the election of Ronald Reagan. Some of you may remember the commercial where you had that serene scene of beautiful nature, pastoral scene of nature, and then the beautiful music, and it said, it's once again morning in America. And that's how it feels to me, not morning, M-O-U-R-I-N-G, but it's morning again. It's a new beginning. The entire world was against Donald Trump, including our own country, and at least half of it. I think it's astonishing that President-elect Trump pulled it off. I was saying 2 weeks prior to the election that he would indeed, in fact, win the election. Last week's show said that I had an epiphany. I began to realize in speaking to the common man out there and women that I ran into during my daily activities both in Pennsylvania, Florida, and New York City, including in the undisclosed location area. In speaking to most people, they essentially were not inspired by Hillary Clinton, and they were very encouraged by the at least potential for a new beginning with Donald Trump, President-elect Donald J. Trump, and they went out and they voted for him. But the entire issue of media bias cannot be ignored because for 18 long months, the entirety of the mainstream media, which includes the now red-faced New York Times, whose publisher, Arthur O. Sulzberger Jr., who we used to call Pinch Sulzberger, his father was called Punch at the New York Times when I was there, said in a letter to the public that they are now going to renew their efforts to try and report more fairly and more honestly about things. Although that's not exactly how it was worded, that's what he was trying to say. That they were going to, the New York Times was now going to rededicate themselves to getting a better read on what the news actually is, not their feelings, not their impressions, and not their hopes and aspirations for, let's say, Hillary Clinton, but the news, the hard facts, the who, the what, the when, the where, and the why, something that you learn as a basic in Journalism 101 if you're a journalism student. They're now going to rededicate themselves after they've been utterly demoralized because of the election and ascension to power of Donald J. Trump, and that they have been proven to be what they've always been all along, partisan operatives for the Democratic Party, an extension of the Democratic Party. They weren't out there trying to report the facts that many people in Middle America, in the Rust Belt, in the old Reagan, the Reagan Democrats of Michigan, who voted overwhelmingly and pushed President-elect Donald Trump over the top. All through the country, people were saying, we've had enough of the political establishment, and we wanted change, and that change finally came. Unfortunately for the Democratic Party, they're a bunch of sore losers right now. We're dealing with a bunch of people in the Democratic Party who are right now in the streets, protesting. Today, here it is, Monday, November 14th. And we are here now broadcasting from the undisclosed location. And yet last night on Sunday evening, Saturday and Friday, ever since the election of Donald J. Trump on November 8th, they've been rioting in the streets. In fact, in California, they were chanting, "Kill the police, kill the police." These people, I'm sure, don't represent the average Democratic voter. I mean, they can't possibly represent the average Democratic voter. But if they don't, then who are they? They call themselves Democrats. They call themselves progressive and liberals and leftists and anarchists and everything else. And they all seem to be under the vast umbrella of the Democratic Party, who now has doubled down and they're saying that they want to elect someone who is a rather extreme person to lead the Democratic Party. He's from Illinois. I forgot the gentleman's name. In fact, he's being touted as the person who could now lead the Democratic Party. And this person is quite an extreme individual, and yet it doesn't seem like the Democratic Party is changing its stripes much. If you look at Hillary Clinton, she's already out there. Last night there was an interview with Leslie Stahl on 60 Minutes. It was broadcast on CBS. That's the Clinton Broadcasting System, CBS, because CNN can no longer call itself the Clinton News Network. They're going to have to bring it back to the Communist News Network, because that's essentially what they espouse, a soft tyranny, which is a type of communism, Marxism, which Hillary Clinton and her party, the Democratic Party, really represent. And if you think that I'm just engaging in hyperbole right here, I'm not, because let's look at the facts. If you're a Democratic-minded person, you're not going to be protesting the results of a Democratic election that was conducted under the rules of the United States Constitution that dealt with the Electoral College and the popular vote, of which President-elect Donald Trump won. He won over 280 electoral votes. That means that he is elected President of the United States, notwithstanding the fact that Miss Clinton did win the popular vote, which is shocking and surprising to me. And yet her operatives, her supporters, people that are on board with her policies in her camp under their tent at the Democratic Party, are out there rioting. They're rioting in places like Chicago, in Miami, and in California. in Philadelphia, and here in front of Trump Tower in New York City on Fifth Avenue. These people, if they're so democratic and they want to have a democracy that they claim they want, then why would they be protesting a democratic process in the form of a U.S. election? Otherwise, they might as well go to Chile and look at the Pinochet model in Venezuela or Chile, or all of these, tin pot dictators that are, strong men in third world countries. That's how elections in third world countries are conducted. I mean, let's look at North Korea, for example, which, surprisingly so, has been keeping their traps shut ever since Donald Trump. Kim Il-jung hasn't said a word about President-elect Donald J. Trump. I don't think it's because he's afraid of him. I think it's because he's got to really collect his thoughts and say, look, we have to tread a little bit more carefully right now. Although a man like that is certainly not one to back down. He is apocalyptic, just like the mullahs in Iran are. And if you notice, they're already, setting the foundation for protesting the fact that Donald Trump is most likely, probably 100% certainly, going to rescind the Iranian nuclear deal, which was supposed to be the hallmark of the Clinton-Obama foreign policy in order to make the world safe by ensuring Iran does acquire a nuclear bomb within 10 years' time or so. We already know that President-elect Donald Trump is going to tear the deal up. There's no doubt about it. Can he do it? Yes, because it's not a treaty. It was not authorized by the U.S. Congress to begin with, even though technically many pundits out there, like Newt Gingrich and others, were saying that it is really more or less a treaty that was unilaterally imposed upon the United States by Barack Obama and the then Secretary of State, John Kerry. They made a deal, and it was more of a treaty, and this deal can be overturned by President-elect Donald Trump, which I really hope it is. Certainly, we don't want to be giving multi-billion-dollar, funding to a rogue regime that is hoping for the return of the third Mahdi, who is going to initiate an apocalyptic war with the West in order to usher in their Messiah and implement world, religion and so forth. But Donald Trump is aware of these things. Now, there was a CBS interview on 60 Minutes conducted by Leslie Stahl at Donald Trump's penthouse, palatial penthouse floor of the Trump Tower on Fifth Avenue in Manhattan last night. It was actually a 2-day-old interview. It was broadcast, it was recorded on Friday, and it was broadcast on Sunday. That would be last night, some 20-some-odd hours ago. And I had to look at this interview and think to myself, first of all, Leslie Stahl, if you are watching the Lionel Mandrake radio program, minus his untrustworthy co-host, Matt Murdock, who is still on hiatus and who does plan to come back this Friday. So those of you who are fans of the show, stay tuned. This woman, Leslie Stahl, who is a CBS, reporter and journalist, who got her start with the Watergate Commission, not Watergate Commission, but the Watergate investigations. She was a local a local reporter for the CBS affiliate, and became involved in the Watergate investigations through their news division. And she began her ascendancy to power. But she gave a speech. Not a speech, but she gave an interview, and it was kind of like a speech, where she was essentially being, in my opinion, somewhat confrontational and a little condescending to President-elect Donald Trump, who was gracious and smart in a lot of his answers to her. For example, she asked, well, are you going to go after the Clintons? And to his credit, and certainly it's not unexpected to me, because despite the fact that the New York Daily News, to its everlasting disgrace, has tried to brand President-elect Donald Trump a lot of disparaging things on their front pages down through the last 18 months. I'm sure they're eating a lot of crow without hot sauce that Hillary probably would have liked to give them, but they're eating a lot of crow platter right now because he is elected, no matter their best attempts at trying to prevent it. In any event, she was there trying to say, well, what are you going to do? Are you going to go after Hillary Clinton? And Donald Trump's answer was, well, she's done a lot of bad things, but it's not my priority. How much more statesmanlike can you get than that? It wasn't his priority, he said to her, Leslie Stahl, because my priority is improving the economy, creating a safe environment for the border, and reforming health care. These are things that he's focused on, and yet the media is still running interference for Hillary Clinton. Can you imagine that? I certainly can't. But then again, when you're dealing with someone like Leslie Stahl, you have to understand that these are leftists, dyed-in-the-wool leftists, who essentially, if you really want to think about it, are true believers in the cause. And the cause to them is, it's kind of nebulous. I mean, the media is really an arm of the Democratic National Committee in some way, shape, or form. Leslie Stahl then went on to say, well, what are you going to do about ISIS? Well, to my viewers out there who are more or less common sense people such as myself, if I may be so bold as to assert that, but if you're more a commonsensical type of person, you're going to say, well, what in the hell did Barack Obama and John Kerry and the then Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton do to combat ISIS? They are primarily responsible for the rise of this particular group in the Middle East right now that has murdered tens of thousands of people, most of whom are Christians and many of whom were fellow Muslims. And they've spread their tentacles all through the Middle East and now into Europe and elsewhere, primarily because of this lackadaisical sort of hands-off approach to we want to feel good and act and pretend that things are well in the world, and they're really not. Donald Trump is a realist, a pragmatist. I believe he's going to get out there and say, look, we're going to have to do what it takes. But he did say to Leslie Stahl, he said, look, I'm not going to tell you that. And she says, you're not going to say how you are going to defeat ISIS. He says, I'm not going to tell you that. She goes, but the American people, he goes, I'm not going to, and then it's the American people with Leslie Stahl. These communists are all for the American people when it suits them in terms of trying to back you into a corner. He says, I'm not going to tell you that. He didn't specifically say why he's going to tell it to her. He did say, I'm not going to tell you this because I don't want to tip them off. But he's been saying this all along. I'm not going to be the kind of person, a commander-in-chief now, Donald J. Trump, who's going to be tipping off the enemy to our activities, movements, and our plans. He even used the example of trying to retake Tikrit and some Iranian city over there, of which there are many that have been absorbed into the Islamic State because of Hillary Clinton's non-action and Barack Hussein Obama's direct action by allowing this to happen, by giving them safe haven, by refusing to bomb vast convoys of oil tankers without first warning the drivers that they have to abandon their vehicles so that they don't kill them. Can you imagine that? He says, I'm not going to let you know what my strategy is, which really shut this woman Stahl up because she was not used to hearing somebody who's decisive. She was trying to use the American people. And let me tell you something about this, the American people and you're a public servant and all this other baloney that the Democrats like to use. I mentioned this on Friday's show, that the Democrats, for the most part, and their media operatives like to say, well, it's democracy now, and we want a bipartisan coalition. Now the big word among the political operatives in the Democratic Party, like this who is the one, the Senator Reid from Nevada, who's busy still attacking Donald Trump, calling Donald Trump a sexual predator, calling Donald Trump someone who's unstable. He just said these things after President-elect Donald Trump was elected to the highest office in the land. Reid is not going to back up because he's a true believer. But Donald Trump, now they want him to be bipartisan because the Democrats are no longer in power. But don't fall for that old trick, people out there. Anyone within the sound of my voice and this image that's going broadcast from the undisclosed location who is watching us right now, me right now, please understand one thing. They're real killers out there, this Democratic Party. And by that, I don't mean figurative. I don't mean literal. I mean figuratively. They really are. They're going to step back right now and try and bait Donald Trump into a false sense of comradeship with a party that hates democracy, because if they didn't hate democracy, they wouldn't be out there protesting in the streets in 8 major cities, threatening to kill police and calling for the assassination of the president-elect. This is not democracy. This is anarchy and fascism, which is mostly backed by the biggest of them all, the biggest undemocratic monsters, in my opinion, of the left, which would be George Soros, of which I'm pretty sure Donald Trump is well aware of. What I wanted to say is the Democrats now want bipartisanship. They want bipartisanship. Now they're saying, well, please, we now have to, have a co-equal branch of government where you may have the House, the Senate, and the executive branch, the judicial, the executive, and the legislative branch. And you have both sides of the House. You have the House of Representatives, you have the Senate, and maybe we are in the minority now. And yes, we're down to 70 governorships in the entire United States. We're down to less than whatever their number of governorships is. It's very low now because a lot of them have been thrown out. And yes, we've been voted out everywhere we've been, most of the places that we've been running. But we want bipartisanship now. The Democrats want bipartisanship now. What's that all about? They want bipartisanship now that they lost not once but twice with their candidate who was so flawed from the very beginning that honestly, like Donald Trump says, and I'm no fan of Bernie Sanders, but in my opinion, Bernie Sanders, Senator Sanders, being an avowed communist is flawed. In my opinion, he shouldn't be allowed to run in a democracy because communism is anti-democratic. Democracy is wealth redistribution. We've had 8 years of this already, and we see the results. Our country's in a financial spiral. We owe $17 trillion in debt. The entire world is taking advantage of us in terms of trade and jobs. Our country has no borders, no sovereignty. We're being forced to pay taxes, carbon taxes, to the United Nations under these false environmental schemes that are designed to redistribute wealth and neuter the United States of America. These are not Democrats. These are communist wealth redistributors. And whatever Bernie Sanders may have had as a flaw, you can say, Bernie Sanders, Senator Sanders, I got to give my hat off to the guy from Brooklyn who now hung up his hat as a senator from Maine or wherever the hell he is a senator. You got to say one thing about him. He's a believer in his cause. Hillary Rotten Clinton, the Hildebeest. Look, I'm gloating right now. I'm glad she's been put down like a rabid dog. You know why? Because it's about time she's put out of service. She has to go to the pastures up there in Chappaqua. She was seen walking her dog. It was like a Bigfoot sighting. Someone spotted her. They just happened to have a camera and they took a picture with her. And she looked pretty relaxed. The media said no. She looked traumatized. In fact, who knew she even had a dog? I mean, that poor dog. I feel worried that she might be kicking him around right now because she lost the election. But I do digress. This woman is a person, unlike Bernie Sanders, Senator Sanders, who believes in nothing. She believes in nothing. Sanders believes in communism, in progressivism, and all the isms that make their point of view wrong for America. America is not about isms. It's about unum, one, being one people. I talk about it. People who watch the show understand my opinion on this. We can't be a balkanized, separate America. We have to be a one America again, which is what Donald Trump, behind me, has said, even during his acceptance speech, which we did see at the beginning of the show, the opening of the show. We had to play it. The people in the crowd were crazy chanting, USA, USA. Why? Because it's morning again in America. There's hope for the future. So many people I spoke with after the election were like, you know something? Win, take, or lose, Donald Trump, the guy who wasn't supposed to win, who had an armada of microphones and cameras pointed at him like anti-aircraft guns, trying to shoot him down in any way, shape, or form. And then an army of operatives who were almost like Gestapo-like in some of their hatred for Donald Trump. Who can remember the MSNBC presidential debate where that guy, I forgot his name, gave the debate, and he referred to Donald Trump as some kind of a mad mogul who was going to destroy the world. He talked to and then it was Ted Cruz who said, look, you're referring to, Donald Trump in this way. You're referring to me in that way. You're referring to all of us in such a biased way. I wonder if that guy, I believe anybody who saw the debate with MSNBC knows who I'm talking about, because Reince Priebus was supposed to be fired for that, putting Donald Trump and the other Republican candidates into that setting, into the fire pan, into the breach, where these people were out gunning for them. And then if you look at Megyn Kelly, another one. Megyn Kelly, yeah, she has a new book out, and she says one thing, she was poisoned with a coffee cup that her driver gave her. Then she retracts on that. Then she was saying that Donald Trump was trying to woo her and that he knew the questions in advance. But then she retracted that and said, well, he didn't know the questions in advance, but I lie to you. She really didn't say those two things. Do you know who did say those two things? The New York Times. They did a review of her book, and they lied about her, and then she was being disparaging to him. Probably a Clinton supporter. Anyone who supported Hillary Rodham Clinton, you have your true believers, people that really believed in her message. But if you look at her message, she didn't have a message, really. Her message was more of appealing to the largest number of people and constituents and separate groups, special interest groups, as possible so as to be elected. She doesn't hold any real core principles that she expressed. Because I could tell you one thing, if it wasn't for the fact that, white people, white lash, that whites are now, kind of the bad boogeyman, in every election. White people are racist. White people are trailer park. And yes, white people, they're mostly uneducated. They voted for Trump. Well, guess what? I heard on the radio yesterday, there was a man who, I'm not sure, it might have been Mark Levin, actually on Friday, who said, no, according to the polling results, the whites who voted for Donald Trump were not uneducated. Many of them were young, in fact. There were a lot of young people voting for Donald Trump. It was unexpected by the Clinton campaign. And a lot of them had college degrees. And by the way, how condescending is it of you Democrats out there to even use that phrase uneducated. I know a lot of people that don't have a college degree or even a high school diploma, and they're a hell of a lot smarter than you pundits out there with your charts and your fancy, slide rules trying to figure out the trajectory of the presidential election every way you can, because you weren't really in search of the truth. You were in search of a result. You were trying to manipulate and to propel people in a certain direction. You guys really got to think about your profession, and I really hope that Donald Trump does start at some point, his company gets involved in a media apparatus so that they can maybe get the message out. Maybe his children will start a media company. But now as president, he's not going to have time for that. Hillary Clinton had no message. She was trying to appeal to the most number of disaffected people that she hoped would come out and support her. And guess what? They didn't. Why? Because she's uninspiring. With that shrieking voice, she was very off-putting. And on many occasions, she called white people, let's face facts here. Last I checked, she's white. And yet she was talking about white people in a lot of terms that, in my opinion, were insulting. We're uneducated. We have to be less racist. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Look at the people out there calling to murder and kill police officers. Let's look at a certain movement that calls itself Black Lives Matter. Can they not be considered to be biased? Can they not be considered to be racial in their perspective on things? Everything is seen through the prism of a racial lens. These are the real people who create a lot of the problems that they then turn around and look for solutions for. They create the problem and then look for the solution. You know why? It's an endless circle. It's like a dog chasing after his tail. They don't want solutions. Donald Trump is going to break that psychopathic cycle. Remember, if something that doesn't work over and over again is continued, it's a form of insanity. I think now we have some sanity in the White House. It was just announced today that Donald Trump announced his chief of staff. His chief of staff is going to be a gentleman that knows the ins and outs of the Republican Party. He's a professional, and he did lead Wisconsin to victory for Trump, and he did lead the Republican Party to victory with Donald Trump. This guy is Reince Priebus. I didn't know it, but he was involved in politics since the age of 16. He was out there as a volunteer at the age of 16. Apparently, he became a lawyer, Reince Priebus. And now he's the president's chief of staff. If you ask me, I didn't like him after the MSNBC debacle because I felt that he was inexperienced enough to trust MSNBC was going to do the right thing by having a moderator on there that was not going to be as utterly and despicably biased as this man was. And you know what? People were calling for Reince Priebus's head. But guess what? He prevailed. Priebus actually was the person who set up the infrastructure that was used by the Republican Party. There were Donald Trump had one campaign office in Florida. Hillary Clinton had 50, and Reince Priebus had 62, I believe it was, campaign offices from the Republican end of things operating in Florida. The infrastructure was there. Donald Trump really prevailed because, and I have to say this, I mean, in my opinion, and I know I'm going to get more hate mail, and my email address is westerntradition@hotmail.com. If any of you out there want to spout off, westerntradition@hotmail.com, because I enjoy your hatred. It really feeds my dislike for you more. So don't think I don't hate back just as much as you hate me. And personally, you guys lost, so you're going to have to get over it. But essentially, I mean, it's a miracle that Donald Trump was able to overcome all of the obstacles that were against him. Because let's not forget, Mr. Priebus may have been helpful with Donald Trump, because I think Priebus was savvy enough to see through this, the fog of all of everybody's. You had all these people, they were holier than thou. You had Jeb Bush, holier than thou, talking about, well, Donald Trump is going to, separate families. He's going to destroy the economy. He's going to build a wall. Don't build walls. Walls don't bring people together. These people are so holier than thou that they don't realize that they're causing the dismantling and destruction of the United States of America. But these people out there, Priebus was able to, and his name is kind of hard to pronounce, Reince Priebus. I never met anybody named Reince or Reince Priebus. It's kind of an unusual name. It almost sounds Roman or Latin in some classic sense of the word. Listen, I'm happy about the results of the election. Many of you are not, but all I say is, as I said in the previous show on Friday, that we have to give President-elect Trump a chance. If you're out there protesting and not my president and he's an illegitimate president, I mean, you're being a fascist rabble-rouser in the streets trying to create chaos, harm people, destroy property. That's not protest. That's rioting. And if you're out there rioting at the democratic process, then guess what? You're anti-democratic, i.e., you're a fascist. Now, let's talk about this guy Bannon, who I think was initially bandied about to be the chief of staff, not Priebus. Instead, he's going to be in a capacity similar to the chief of staff. He's going to be sort of in the department of strategizing. I forgot what the department or the function that he's going to be in charge of is called, but it's basically political strategizing. Of course, someone like Bannon is ideal for that role. Number one, he's not an insider. So talk about draining the swamp. And yes, I have something to say about that. Draining the swamp. Donald Trump is going to drain the swamp. Don't worry about that. Today on the media,